I'm here today with Bill Prone, Managing Director of our Systems Consulting Group here at Dopkins, a very familiar face with the clients in our OPWDD world. Bill has been instrumental over the past few years in presenting contemporary thinking from a systems perspective and all the changes that really are upon us right now in this OPWDD environment, i.e. moving from a cost model to a more of a managed care model. Last year in May at our FMA conference, Bill and I had a conversation about these changes, and Bill's, frankly, his observations were the seeds of a new strategy here we've implemented at Dopkins called MC2, which is designed to help our clients through some of these changes that, as I said, were upon us now. So, Bill, tell us a little more about MC2, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. MC2 is our shorthand for managed care, managed costs. The idea being that managed care is primarily managing your costs. If you go back and look at the history of managed care and healthcare industry, the point of it was to eliminate waste, duplication, etc. in the healthcare world in order to lower the cost of healthcare in this country. Right. So cost management is the first step. That's the point of managed care. Get the costs down. So how do you do that? You identify your costs, first of all. What are they? And then begin to analyze them, compare them. Which ones are duplicates? How do I change that, etc. So that's really the first step in managed care, is identifying and controlling your costs.
Right.
The second step is to optimize and assure the quality of your outcomes. Because the point is to lower costs, but not to lower costs so low that I can't provide decent care.
And that seems to be a really big concern of a lot of our clients right now. How can we keep our costs manageable but still provide the quality of service?
Correct. So managing costs or reducing costs without the counterbalance of quality outcomes is a very slippery slope. So we need to know, what are we doing? What services are we providing? Are they of the highest quality, in spite of the fact that we are actively trimming our waste, duplication, etc.
Right.
So it's the misconception, I think, in some of managed care is it's eliminate costs. It's eliminate bad costs. I guess it's like cholesterol. You got good and bad. So there are good costs that get you good outcomes, and there are bad costs that don't. And how do I identify those? Well, I keep checking to make sure that my quality outcomes are still there.
Now that brings up actually a pretty good thought here. Maybe we should pursue a little bit. In our recent blogs that we've put out there in regard to MC2, we talked about 4 buckets, if you will, of issues that need to be paid attention to within this new environment. That being cost accounting, not to be confused with cost management, performance management, organizational structure, and compliance. And I think you were very astute in observing that those 3 sets of issues are almost in a linear format. In other words, when you enter in a certain area of cost accounting, you will very naturally flow through those remaining 3 issues. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, the goal is to lower costs, so that has to be the starting point. If I'm not going to address my costs, there is no managed care. So I start with addressing those costs. Once I've identified costs and can begin to lower them, every time I lower costs or identify a cost that needs to be eliminated, I move on to step 2, check it against my outcomes and my quality. Make sure that that change has not so adversely affect my outcomes and my quality that I'm causing the whole process to fall apart. So in that sense, I think it's linear. I got to start with lowering my costs, then compare them to my outcomes. Once I've done that, once I've identified a bunch of costs that I can safely reduce and still manage my quality and performance, the next step is, how do I create a structure organizationally to maintain and promote that concept. I shouldn't really make changes in my organizational structure unless those changes are in support of something worthwhile. The worthwhile is lowering my costs without affecting my outcomes.
And you said something a couple minutes ago that probably applies here too, when you were talking about all costs are not necessarily bad. In fact, in a situation of managed costs, likely certain costs may go up in certain areas. So we tend to look at that, correct me if I'm wrong, but we tend to look at that as more of a reallocation, if you will, of costs, or maybe a better word would be a redirection of costs. Because there are certain services, let's say, well, let's put it this way, we would clearly want most of our costs to be aligned with providing program services as opposed to some kind of overhead that's not necessarily adding value to the people we serve.
True.
Correct? And that really plays into this whole idea of perhaps having to modify the organizational structure to complement those changes. Right?
And I think a good example of that is the fourth box in the sequence, and that is compliance. I mean, compliance is often thought of as, okay, it's something I have to do, but I think of compliance in the terms of Ronald Reagan's diplomacy, trust but verify. The point of compliance is to go back and make sure I'm doing all the right things right and not doing any bad things I shouldn't be doing.
Right.
Not just following the letter of some law. So that's where I verify that my good costs are effectively being managed and my bad costs are not. So from that perspective, one might think, well, compliance is not a good cost because it's something I have to do. It's a necessary evil, if you will. But I think if it's done right, compliance can be a very good cost because it's preventing me from doing things I shouldn't be doing and ensuring I'm doing things right. So again, that's the last step in the linear process. So I'm going to first identify costs, what I can reduce, make sure that that doesn't affect my outcomes, create structures and organization around it to promote that, and have a process to follow up and verify that that's all working the way it should be. That's MC squared.
That's terrific. I think that's a great summary. And okay, well, Bill, thanks a lot for your insight on MC squared. We really appreciate it. I want to remind everybody that we are having our roundtable, our next roundtable on October 16th. I believe that's a Thursday. More information is certainly on the way about that. We'll be talking more in depth on MC squared and how our strategy may help you through the maze of change. Thanks very much. I'm Ralph Jeswald. Thanks for listening.